Today's video, let's take a look at for loops and dictionaries. Alright, why are we pairing these two things up? Why for loops and dictionaries? Well, there are two types of for loops that we can use here. And in addition to that, dictionaries are a little more interesting than, say, an array. And with this, we can get a more interesting project with it as well. We'll cover arrays, of course, maybe next time. But dictionaries have, I would say, a little more to go off of. Because arrays, when we think about it, we can add things, we can remove things. And that's the main purpose with them, right? Of course, there's other things that we can do. We can pop things out, which again, just comes down to removing things, just removing and returning. Anyways. So to get down to this, we're going to need some variables. Oops, I almost put mine in the wrong place. So we're going to need a dictionary. Some kind of dictionary to hold item. Now, what I want to do with this is I want us to create a dictionary, obviously. But we're going to use this as like a secret auction type thing. So once we have entries with names and amounts, we're going to be comparing those and announcing who the highest bidder is. So we're going to provide a name as well as the amount. If you don't want to provide the name, you can just give the amount. Or if you don't want to provide the amount, you can just give the name, completely up to you. But either way, to get started with this, we're going to need a dictionary. So let's go ahead and do we want to export it? You know what? Not right now. Maybe later, I'll change my mind. But for now, let's go ahead, public. And for a simple dictionary, we can just call Godot.collections.dictionary. And I can see, I did check. You guys cannot see that right now. But the scene you're looking at is just a control node. And I just have a label in the center that I can use to display this information. I'm going to turn this on. And here is Visual Studio Code. This is an external editor, and I showed you how to set that during the last video. And I did mention that we do have benefits here. So for example, if I come in here, the benefit is you can see some of these things written out, right? You got some autocomplete you can put in. And let's call this auction bids and end that with a semicolon. And I'll go ahead and save that. And this is where the benefit of using an external IDE comes in, is these autocompletes, especially when you're struggling or if you're learning and you might forget something, you can put it in here. I still prefer the built-in IDE, but that's just more of a personal preference. Obviously with C#, some of the benefits you do start losing because we don't have that C# documentation or anything in there. So if you really want to use an external IDE, today you'll see what the experience is like with that, and then between this video and last, you can get an idea of which route you feel like you want to take. And we're not going to need the process function, so I can remove that. Alright, so let's take a look at what do we need? Well, we're going to need to edit our dictionary. We're going to need items to be added into it in order for us to be able to go in and have things to go through, right? So let's take a look at some of these things that you can do. So we'll go ahead, create a public void because we're not going to return anything. And what do we want to call this? Let's call this dictionary learning. Go. And whoops. Open close parentheses, next line, square brackets, or squiggly brackets, not so much a square bracket, and there we go. Once you've used GDScript, you kind of have an idea of how we can add, remove, and edit some of these keys. So let's go ahead and take a look. So to add key and the value to dictionary. To do that, all we're going to do is we're going to take our dictionary, which is auction bids. So you can see the benefit here of using an external already paying off here. So we say auction bids, and just like a dictionary in GDScript, we can just put in the key here. And in this case, let's call it, let's say Johnny, and maybe Johnny is a high spender, right? So we're going to go ahead and we'll set that to 50 buckaroos. So we'll set it to an integer of 50 and end that with a semicolon. And now if we were to look at this dictionary, we would see that Johnny is an entry in here. So let's go ahead inside of our ready function. Let's call this dictionary learning function inside of our ready, and let's go ahead and print out our dictionary. gd.print. And here we're just going to print out our auction bids. And remember to end that with a semicolon. Go ahead and save that, and when we run this, alright everyone, solved the problem, and now it wants to accept both of these methods. I don't know why it's going to be a little picky here, but that's fine. Up in our variable, all I did is I just set it equal to a new dictionary and set it to our curly braces. I didn't need to do that in my other script that I was testing things with. The code is identical, but for whatever reason, it's going to yell at me this time for it. So I guess if you have that issue, go ahead and set it to a new dictionary. But there you go. Now you can see that just setting or accessing a key and setting it to a value, if the key doesn't exist, we add it. It gets added to the dictionary. And the alternative is you can call the add function on our dictionary and pass in two values. First one being the key, second being the value. And take a look down there in the output. You can see they're both being printed out when I print the dictionary in the ready function. Alright. So hopefully that clears up that odd issue. I'm still not sure why that was happening when, again, that was not needed in the other code I have off to the side here. But anyways, moving on, we can also come in and now that we have two items in there, let's go ahead and say add key value to dictionary. And I'm hitting the wrong button. We'll come on down and we'll say remove key from dictionary. And in order to do this, we would just come in, we would get our auction bids, and all we do is we call remove. Inside of the parentheses here, we list the key that we want to remove. So let's say we want to remove Jim out of there. So we should now have a dictionary that just contains Johnny at 50. Go ahead and save that. Rebuild and run the project. Take a look at the output down there. And we just have Johnny. Alright, awesome. So now we know how to add. We know how to both add and remove to and from our dictionary. Now, what if we want to know if a dictionary has a specific key in it instead of getting an error when trying to access something that may not exist? Well, to do that, we can actually call something called contains. So we check if a key exists in the dictionary by using this if statement, and in C# we have to surround our condition inside of this pair of parentheses. And to check if a key exists, we call the contains function on our dictionary, and we pass in a key. In this case, we can pass in Johnny, and if Johnny is found, which it will because it's still in the dictionary, we remove Jim, but Johnny's still there, we'll print found it. Inside of the output, you will see that it is indeed printed out as found it. Now if we try calling Jim the key that was removed and make sure to save and rebuild that. We'll see that found it does not appear because that condition is not true, but at the same time, we're not running into an error for trying to access a key that doesn't exist. So this is a nice way that you can go about checking if a key exists before accessing it, if there's a chance that it might not. Alright. And if you want to edit a key in the dictionary, of course it's the same as our initial version here of adding. You just access the key and change the value to something else. So there's no point really going over that. It's the exact same code there. And that'll do it for our dictionaries here. I'll go ahead and add a few more entries in, and I'm no longer going to remove Jim because we're going to be using Jim. Well, let's go ahead and jump into the for loops here. Whoops, that's one outside. We want to be on the inside still. So say public void for loop. For loop. We'll call it for loop test. There we go. Now, in order to do these for loops, we have the standard for loop where it's like, oh, for like I like 6 times or something, right? We're going to increase I at the end of all of our, at the end of the loop. That way we can keep running and not get us stuck into an infinite loop. And maybe you want to print out all of those I's or use those I's as an index to go through or something, right? So let's take a look. So we go for, we have our pair of parentheses. Now, this might look a little confusing, but it's everything that we kind of went over. So in GDScript, you say for I. So you kind of got to declare that I there. So then that's what we're doing here at first. For, and then I is an integer, setting it to 0. We put a semicolon to end it there. We follow that up with our condition, so I less than 5. And you could, of course, set this to the length of something like, or the size of an array, for example. And that'll be just, that would work out just fine if you want to do that for an integer. And at the end here, we do I++, which just says increase I by 1. And we have our curly braces that go inside it. And all we're going to do here, just to show this off, is we're just going to go ahead and print out I. Make sure I end that with a semicolon. And make sure that we call this function. Go, and if we run this and look at the output, we will see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, just like we would expect with GDScript. Now, that's all well and good, but what if I told you there is another for loop? And this loop is called a foreach loop. So for each. It's another type of for loop that doesn't exist in GDScript. To my knowledge, at least, I've never ran into it, and anytime I've put it, it always threw an error at me. But for each allows us to go, it's a little more specific, especially in its naming, and some people might make more sense. It's like we're saying for each item in this, right? So we'll say like for each, and for each, we're gonna have an I. It's gonna be a string this time instead of an int, and we can say in, and this is where we can get whatever. So if we had like a full string array or something like that, we can certainly put that in there. But let's go ahead and I'll show you how to get all your keys. So we'll say for auction bids dot keys, and then of course we have our curly braces, and all we're going to do here is print out what that I is. Spell that correctly. There we go. So you see in our initial for loop here, we're going to get integers. And in this for each loop, we're going to get each of our keys so we can do something with that. Make sure that is saved, and let's take a look inside of our output. And there you go. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have Jim and Johnny. Perfect. So you can see all these different situations that we want to go with here. So in the case of if you're dealing with a regular array, you can use the for loop for your indexes. When you're dealing with something like dictionaries, where you're going to have different keys, then you can use something like foreach. But again, that's going to come down to your situation and what you want to go with. So now we know how dictionaries work, how we can add things to dictionaries, remove things. We know how to go through a loop of everything inside of our dictionary. So we can now put that all together. And I'm just going to pull both of those out for the moment out of our ready function. And I'm going to go ahead and take a moment and add a bunch more values into our dictionary here. Now, if you did export it, you'll see it off on the right hand side in your inspector here. And you can come through and you can add your values and keys here. If you've never done it through the inspector here before, we're going to go to the key, hit this little I button, select string, type in someone's name. For the value, we're going to select integer, and you can go ahead and put a number in there. Alright, I'm just going to continue adding mine through code here, and I'll see you in a moment. Alright, so I have my set of characters in here. I've added 3 more. We have Hal, Duck, and Joey. Hal, not really cheap, but he's kind of on that same level as Johnny. Joey's going a little more expensive, and Duck likes to live things dangerously and is throwing out a big 150 to make sure he gets whatever it is that's being put on auction today. So I'll make sure to call my dictionary learning function here to make sure that my entries get put in. And now we need a loop to select the winner. So I'm going to go ahead and we can create a function for this. Let's go ahead, public void, and let's access let's call it select winner. Drop down, and there we go. And inside of our parentheses here, I'm going to pass in, or will we pass something in? Probably should as well. We don't have to though. Alright, so I'm passing in a dictionary, and I'm just calling that bidders here. So let's go ahead, and we can run a for each loop through this. And if you remember, we take a look, we're getting a string of I. So we get a string of I in our bidders dot keys. And then that has its own curly braces pair. Now, we're going through each bidder in here, and we need to do something. Well, we need to see who has the highest bid. So for that, we need to store the highest bid. So above our for loop, we're going to go ahead and create an int for highest bid. That'll be set to 0 by default, because we need some kind of number to compare it to. And we'll create one for a string called highest bidder, and that'll be an empty string by default. Make sure to end these with your semicolons. Inside of our for loop, we can go ahead and make our comparisons. So we're going to check if bidders, right. We're going to check if our bidders is higher. Whoops, other way around. We'll check if highest bid is less than our bidders and I, whatever the key is, so we can get the right value for that. And this will have its own pair of curly braces, and you see we're getting an issue here. And if we just hover over it, and our editor here was saying we cannot compare basically an integer versus an object of some sort. So what we can do is, and this is where the conversion comes in, we can have a pair of parentheses and type int inside of it just before our bidders gets put in there. And as you see, that sorts that out. So make sure that we're comparing it as an int, which is fine because that's what all of our keys are. Now, if our highest bid is smaller than the bidder we're checking, then we need to set the highest bid to whatever our new highest bid is, which is obviously the one we just compared to. So we'll say highest bid is now equal to whatever this is here. End it with a semicolon. Awesome. And now we need to know who that highest bidder is. So we'll say highest bidder is equal to I. Because remember, I is going to be a string of whatever key that we're currently looking at. So I is going to be Johnny, Jim, Doc, Joey, and so on. Alright, so with this, we now have a highest bid and highest bidder. So we should know who has the highest bid here. So now we can go outside of our if statement, and we can go outside of our for loop, because now we know what these are, and we can go ahead and get our label to set that. So let's go ahead, get node, and this is going to be a label type, remember. And if we were to take a look, or remember back, we do have our parentheses followed by the path to get to it. And in our case, it is a direct child of the node that this script is on. And it is also just named label, the default. And now we can access the text property. And we can set that to whatever it is we want to set it to. So say highest bid, and then we'll just add on to that. What is our highest bid? That'll be highest bid, and then I'll add as well highest bidder. Obviously, you don't have to. Highest bidder. All right. So now if we run that, go ahead, and if you wanted to, you could also print this out, but mine's not being printed out. And I forgot to call this function anyway, but I'll take advantage of that to show. You capture this window, that way we can see it happens. There we go. All right, so make sure that we call this inside of our ready function after we declared text. And you'll see here we still have a little red squiggly under it, and it's telling us because it needs an argument of something for the parameter bidders. So we can go ahead and pass in our dictionary of auction bids, and that error goes away. Make sure to save it, run it, and we should now see the highest bidder on our screen. The highest bid was 150, and the highest bidder was Duck. All right, so now we have our own little, not exactly a secret auction because we're telling who it is at the end. But if you have some way of allowing your user to input everything, you can keep everything secret because you now know how to add keys and values to the dictionary. And we've now gone over our for loops and for each, and set the text of our label to show who our winners are. As well as we made comparisons. We have our if statements. Again, we took a small look at functions here. We added in parameters, so that's something new that you didn't get last time. And all the different ways you can, or the different ways that you can modify a dictionary. Alright, that'll do it for this video. Take care, have yourselves a good one. Hopefully this isn't too long. Probably is. But take care. Have yourselves a good one.